Everybody. It's Wednesday, and this is Direct Line Live. We are waiting on our current guest. Just a programming note. I know a lot of you folks tuned in to see Chris Palombi, who is running for U.S. Congress in Maryland 5. He had unexpected event come up, so thereby he is not going to be on this week, but we will have him on in the next few weeks in the future. We like Chris. Next week, we will have the congressional candidate from Maryland District 8. And we are awaiting our guest who shall jump in. But in the meantime, Mark Unkelfer has just put out a great article that's out on the Montgomery County Republican Club's website. Go check it out, montgomerycountyrepublicanclub.com. It's right there on the front page. Mark, tell us about your article.
Well, breaking news today is that the at the state level went forward. The Board of Public Works went forward and approved an important step in the Hogan End Gridlock or Traffic Relief Plan. This is the effort. This is the plan to add additional lanes paid for by basically voluntary tolls by hot lanes. That
I'm a big fan of hot lanes.
What?
I am a big fan of hot lanes.
You know, it's important to recognize about that. I've heard it variously described as toll lanes and other things. And of course, the important thing is it's a voluntary toll. So if you want it, you can go in the hot lane and get places faster, or alternatively, stay in the other lane and you actually, and don't take the fee, but you actually are the beneficiary of the fact that some traffic is being diverted into the hot lane. They're paying extra, but that's opening up more headway. So it's interesting. So one of the things about this, first of all, of course, Peter Franchot voted for it. He's one of the three members of the board. The state treasurer voted against it, but 2-1, that's what it required.
Is the state treasurer still Nancy Kopp?
Yes, it's still Nancy
Your former state delegate.
That's right. Well, what's interesting about this is trying to figure out where the Montgomery County Council is. So they sent a letter saying they didn't want this vote to go forward, or they didn't support it. But that comes after a reversal a couple weeks ago in which 5 out of the 9 members of the council said they support the plan. And so do you remember John Kerry, who voted for it against it before he voted against it?
Yeah.
So what the Montgomery County Council is apparently trying to do, I'm sure somebody would come on and try and explain this to me, is they basically want to have it both ways. They can point to letters that they've done. Again, all 9 of them supported a letter saying that the action shouldn't be approved today. Obviously, the governor and Peter Franchot disagreed. Just as a month ago, they supported the reversal that took place at the regional level. I shouldn't say all of them. 5 out of the 9 supported it going forward. So they could point to their procedural opposition today as opposed to a month ago. It's really politics at its worst. But politics at its best is the fact that this plan has had lots of opposition. Members of the Democratic caucus from Montgomery County have not been supportive, but it's still going forward thanks to both the governor and let's give him credit, Peter Franchot.
Which means Peter Franchot cannot expect big fundraisers in Montgomery County from his lefty cohorts on the council.
You're right. And actually, one of the things that's been very interesting in this is the role of the unions. One of the unions that was first out in supporting the Franchot for governor was the laborers. The laborers supported, as I recall, I'm about 90% sure they supported Hogan in 2018, but they were they are more construction focused and they're looking for the construction jobs for this. They would dearly love this project to be a union project.
Davis-Bacon.
Sorry?
Are they going to use the Davis-Bacon rules for?
Well, Davis, basically, in effect, yes, they would work through what is called the effort that they support is through a project labor agreement, which basically creates an agreement where the rules are set. I'm not
But
sure how
that's why
it applies, because this is not a federal project and actually does not get very much, if at all, federal dollars because of the way it's structured. So we'll put that to the side for now.
Yeah, and also that's also why when they rebuilt the Wilson Bridge, the Virginia side came in under budget while the Maryland side came in over budget. And that's because Maryland relied on union laborers, union, this and union that.
Well, this has been one of the asks that Peter Franchot has had, is to, how shall I say, unionize much of this project, and is one of in bits and starts, this has been one of the areas in which the governor has frankly given ground. But that's the price to get things done.
Let me play devil's advocate. Let me try and channel AOC here. Peter Franchot is having union laborers who will never be able to afford to use these hot lanes for themselves, for the wealthiest of wealthiest Montgomery County elitists. That is
but that's actually not. But that's actually not true. Actually, because these are good,
but
paying jobs that they
Mark,
have.
But that's going to be the narrative.
And the data, no, I understand they say that, and the data says that when again, we have lots of experience with hot lanes already, and it's more likely the mother that's rushing to get home from work, who needs to get to the daycare center before they go into fines. Parents will remember that. So it's not a function strictly of income. It's a function of what your time value is for being able to save a couple of minutes in order to get someplace so that much faster.
Yeah, and I like hot lanes, and I'll tell you, when I drive to Florida, I plan to drive the day the hot lanes are open southbound and they're open northbound when I'm coming back. Great state of Florida has a lot of hot lanes there. The Sun Pass, which I really wish everything would just be easy pass across the country and just have one standard format for all of these. Because we're fine up here going all the way to Maine and all the way to Ohio with Easy Pass, but you start going you've got Peach Pass in Georgia, Sun Pass in Florida. You've got something, I think Peach Pass works in Alabama, I think, and then Texas has their own pass.
Well, there is effort to standardize that, and there's an association of toll roads and bridges and I guess tunnels. I think that's tunnels, bridges, anyway, whatever, that is working on this project. And I've heard that they're making progress. I don't know where they are on that, but I absolutely agree with you on that.
Yep, and I'm a big fan myself. I'm a big fan of hot lanes. Well,
and this is something that a lot of folks on our council and our county executive have a tendency to forget, is that we really do have a lot of experience with them around the country.
Yeah.
And
it works well.
They really do attract. The economics can be very supportive of that.
And it's I think it's well worth it. I think I save stress driving because I don't know if you've ever done the drive from Richmond to DC. You're going fine until you get to about Petersburg, Virginia, and then you see a set of brake lights. I really wish, and if that's why I wish Republican governors got more than one term in Virginia and Democrats only got one term. If Bob McDonnell was there for another 4 years, or if Governor Allen were there for another 4 years, or Governor Gilmore, Governor McDonnell would have built the hot lanes all the way down to Richmond.
Actually, you're right. You're sort of right about that, but it is an interesting difference between Democrats in Virginia and Democrats in Maryland. Democrats in Virginia, or particularly in Northern Virginia, have embraced sort of a all of the above approach to transportation policy. So whether it's taxes, whether it's hot lanes, whether it's tolls, they have been very supportive. Whether it's building, obviously the Silver Line extension, they have embraced a whole range of transportation.
And let me push back.
And let me finish the point though. That's quite different than the Montgomery County approach. The Montgomery County, again, today we're trying to figure out where the council is on it. Yep. But the approach of only public transportation is an electoral loser.
Yep. And I think I just heard a ding, so the doorbell rang. I think we might have our surprise guest is here. Welcome, Accuracy in Academia Chairman Don Irvine.
Who knew?
Welcome to Direct Line.
This is like the mini version of Dr. Politics here.
Yeah, we were talking about transportation, because we know you were busy. Glad you could jump on. Appreciate it. So tell us what's happening at Accuracy in Academia these days. You guys when I used to work for you guys, had a great publication which has gone digital. Campus Report, as pretty much every print publication has.
Yeah, we're doing both. In the sense of we're doing plenty or trying to do plenty digital. Believe it or not, we're still pumping out the Campus Report, but we're doing it all 10 a year instead of 12. And in the old days, it used to be a newspaper, and now it's a newsletter. So, but we don't have that many. We don't have that many subscribers, so it's all done here from the house.
Oh wow! Okay, that's great. And you guys have done some great groundbreaking work. With Accuracy in Academia over the years and exposing liberal professors on college campuses. I think you were doing this long before other groups have gotten into catching. I remember there was an AIM conference in California in '96 you did where you had that where I believe it was Charlie Wiley that exposed that professor that was pushing a left-wing agenda in the classroom at Berkeley.
That probably was. Charlie would do stuff like that.
Shocker.
Charlie's like what, 93, something like that.
Yeah, he's on Facebook now. Charlie Wiley and I are Facebook friends.
I'm gonna have to say, I think at his age, I think it's his wife behind that whole thing.
I know. Yeah, I agree. And I did reach out to him to talk because we were going to do a show in May, and I go, we should get an anti-communist on May Day to talk about communism, and never got a response back. But I think that's why. Dolph's another one that was a great anti-communist, and you had was it Randy? What's his name? He had the dog Fremont. He did the Washington Inquirer publication. Another good.
Arthur Randy Randall.
Yes, there you go. I was trying to call him Randy Reed, but that's not. That's another person. But tell us what's changed over the last 30 plus years at AIA.
I think let's just both you and Mark know. You can watch the landscape change. Going back to the time of AIA, there was some campus activism, but not very much. You definitely didn't have conservative professors that wanted to come out and say they were conservative. University of Maryland, the only person that we probably knew was Don Devine back in the day, right? So yeah. they were pretty hard. They were pretty hard to find. Then again, Maryland had, they tried to bring in Bertel Ullman, the communist, basically from SUNY up in New York, and that didn't go over very well with some. Well, that always surprised me. Liberal Maryland is that how much of a fight there was to keep him off of campus and come down here and take over. So I have to say maybe that's the one redeeming of Maryland during the time I was there, is that rejecting that guy. But yeah, we've gone from that thing. We're seeing lots of organizations trying to do things. I'll give credit to campus reform and what Malcolm has done well, and all the other people there. So you've got I think just an over change from people who were afraid to say things to people who are now more than willing to speak up, right? You can find them, you can watch Fox News or whatever, and you see a lot of these kids starting to say, look, I'm not going to take this crap anymore. I'm going to speak my mind. they have social media has changed a lot of this. They can use Twitter, they can use Facebook, they can use YouTube, whatever, Snapchat, whatever you want to do, and they get their message out, and people are paying attention to that and realizing that, yeah, these campuses, and that goes for K through 12 too, is that there's a lot of, radical activism going on there. And thank goodness for these kids, speaking out. And thank goodness for now some of the parents starting to figure this out and saying, yeah, we got to do something about this too. We don't want our kids being taught this crap.
And I think this is the one single invention that basically has been able to allow us on the right to expose the radical left. I mean, before in the old days, I remember kids would mail tapes from lecturers, from their professors, to your dad when I was working for you at AIA. And now, and many a times you have and then we'll get stories about professors pulling the tape out and breaking the tape and doing all sorts of. They can't do that today. They can't take a phone and break it in half because it's kind of like when Hillary Clinton decided to destroy her cell phones, told people to take hammers and start smashing them up, but never mind, the texts are out in the cloud. So it's and we've had you guys have been on the forefront. I know we just passed an anniversary of the untimely passing of Vincent Foster, who committed suicide in Fort Marcy Park a few weeks ago, and I know you guys broke the big stories on that as well. So AIM and AI.
You're one of the few people that's going to remember that story.
I mean, you guys also had the Star Report, I think, ahead of time too, out on your website back in the days.
Like
when it first came out.
During that last period of my father's life and everything like that. I mean, between Vince Foster and TWA 800, those two things probably consumed him a great deal. And yeah, I mean, besides Foster, I mean, we just had, what has it been? Has it been since TWA 800 went down? Yeah. So I think the NTSB is finally going to destroy pretty much everything relating to that now. Now it's been a couple of decades plus. Yeah, I mean, I still remember, which my mother never did find out while she was alive. I still remember my father being dragged out of an NTSB hearing because he refused to leave because they wouldn't answer his questions. And upon television about that, and that was that was one of the stations my mom would watch on cable, and my father was doing all these kind of strange maneuvers on television that next morning because he didn't want her to see him dragged out of this meeting, that kind of thing, that kind of stuff. He was a very proper Japanese. No, that would have been a terrible embarrassment.
Yeah, and I remember even before all of this stuff, your dad was a pioneer in exposing the liberal biases at CBS, which, unless you were living under a rock, everybody knew that with Westmoreland. I mean, that was AIM's big capstone, I think, right? The Westmoreland.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think for a number of years, AIM did a lot of things that, particularly pre-internet, where you could do things. You weren't able to gather the information, so you needed groups like AIM to gather information to try to expose these networks. But it went on anywhere from the Westmoreland case, or we got involved with some legal cases. When it came to defending conservatives, Howard Safer, who later became the police commissioner in New York, we helped defend him when he got smeared when he was working for the U.S. Marshal's Department, just as DOJ and Witness Protection and ABC's, program 2020 tried to smear him. One of the things I learned, and over the years, was just that. You remember Victor Lasky? We got involved with too. It's just that it's amazing. Until we got into this, I had no clue, how much footage these, particularly 60 Minutes, shot on these interviews use. They shoot 3, 4, 5, 6 times as much footage as they're really going to use, and that editing process is so powerful. That's why we got involved in all these things, because of the distortions that were made by taking things out of context. And the Howard Safer thing was funny to me in the end. It was the payoff was not getting the money that we gave to Howard Safer for his legal defense after ABC settled out of court. They decided they didn't want to go to trial. Was that when AIA tried to do their conference up at university, and we got shut down after the first day because the first evening we had Ward Connerly speak, and we had a massive protest outside the faculty house. And the midnight, the president of Columbia University called my father and said, your conference is off. That's it. You're not going to be allowed on campus. And I hadn't a word. I show up at Columbia and all the gates are locked. And the campus police are not letting anybody in without a student ID. And we're like, what the heck is going on here? And my father put a call into Howard Safer. He got a hold of him, and we held the rest of our conference on Saturday outdoors in a park, kind of overlooking Harlem. And we had some protesters that came out still because Dinesh D'Souza was one of the speakers. And Dinesh is a lightning rod. He was a lot back then, and that was a long time ago.
Yeah. This is before he became a household name.
Yeah, and Howard, what did Howard Safer, as the police commissioner in New York, did? He went ahead and made sure that he had multiple police officers, squad cars, everything like this, and they cordoned off an area till this was the protest zone. All they could do is walk up and down the street in a circle, and that was it. And they had a line of men in blue and everything like this. It was like, well, he was very appreciative of everything we did, and he definitely paid us back that way. And the protesters were, what are they going to do? All they could do is march up and then go back and go back. They were so ineffective. We were kind of over to the side a little bit and everything like that. But it hurt Columbia University, it hurt reputation, because we had other people who were not, say, diehard conservatives speaking at that conference, but were very much in favor of free speech. And they wrote about it in U.S. News and other publications about how, Columbia just shut down free speech because the students there didn't like what Ward Connerly said. They were protesting what Dinesh D'Souza said before he even spoke. So it's kind of the preview of cancel culture before it became big this time around, right? Yeah.
And then we've had conferences. I remember the California conference, where we had a couple of infiltrators who bought a ticket, came there. Daniel Deportado is what name that comes to mind, if you recall. He held up this poster. He was with that Aslan movement, talking about how, and I remember, I want to say it was Dolph that made the comment. He goes, well, I shouldn't say that here. You know what he said about what would happen if California and Texas and New Mexico and Arizona became part of Mexico.
Yeah, and like anything else in the conservative movement, you're going to have those people get in there. And if they register, they pay their money. CPAC is for a number of years, particularly in the exhibition. There was a guy, I can't remember his last name. His name was Louis something or other. But I would see him every year at CPAC at in the convention hall, and I guess he had a press pass. But he was covering CPAC for some, far left, publication, and he would always go around. He always visit our booth to see what the heck we were doing and stuff like that, But it was always a negative, take on what was happening at CPAC. But he had every right to be there. The conservatives in general have never really tried to shut out the other side as long as they're right. Whereas our side gets shut down all the time, even now, especially now.
Yeah, and I think it's actually a very good thing. It kind of shows you're an organization that's come of age, that the left is infiltrating and coming in and actually trying to infiltrate and cause disruption. And here's the thing, we don't do that. I know our friend Peter LaBarbera, a former AIA ED, he used to go and want to antagonize the left, but that was the few far in between,
Yeah, well, I think there's something about people who stand up. We had a ED of for AIA for a few years, and that was Dan Flynn. He was a Marine Corps reservist. Okay, believe me, I learned that you're a guy like that at all. He wrote a little booklet, on Mumia Jamal, the cop killer And he used that booklet. I still remember him. He took that out to a speaking engagement. I think it was the Berkeley College Republicans or something like that sponsored him out there. And he put these booklets out on a table, and he was doing his speech and to protest. But not only did they protest, they took the booklets and then burned them. You call the campus police, and they're kind of like, it's free speech or whatever. No, that's property theft and destruction. That's not free speech. We don't go around taking other people's stuff like that and then burning them like that.
Yeah, it's like we're not burning Barack
burning
Obama's
has
book.
a particularly bad connotation, right? Burning books.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of interesting to see how this has all developed over the time.
And I also think this is, it's also a precursor to like today, back then the Democrats were burning books. Now they're just burning words we can't use. We can't use mother and father. We can't use, what do you call male, female. We can't use gender, he, she. It's like, we're, like, can we even say humans anymore? Because it's got, human, there's man and human,
Right. Have we not to watch the language we use in meetings and everything else we go to? We can't do things. I mean, look, Andrew Cuomo, when he talks about, hey, look, this is my culture. This is my generation. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. Yeah. And there's a certain bit of truth to that for him in a way. I mean, Joe Biden is kind of guilty of a lot of the same type of things, touchy-feely things. But boy, I mean, none of them even think about even touching, a male or whatever, and doing that kind of stuff. And you have to watch the language you use, right? I mean, I kind of think about just the times in the office. I'm like, there are things I might have said to my colleagues, my female colleagues 25 years ago, that would get me into serious trouble today. Amazing how much that has changed. But my intent was never harmful, but boy, it could be construed that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, Don, just like a few minutes ago, I was going to quote Dolph's comment about the Aslan movement, but 2021, I can't say that. 30 years ago, it would have been fine to say what he said, but today, you get branded a racist, a hate monger,
and people want to hear what they want to hear. I mean, I don't know if you, I don't know if you heard the story about the baseball player for the Marlins, but Lewis Brinson, they call her though. I think the reporting needed to be a lot better on this, and he claims that when they were playing the Rockies the other night, that he heard a fan use the N-word, right? Upon further investigation, it appears that the fan was calling the mascot, whose name is Digger, apparently, and stuff like this. Now, Brinson has got this like YouTube thing or whatever. He says, I watched this 50 times, and I'm pretty sure this is, I'm pretty sure this is what it is. It's really disappointing. But to me, a lot of this is like, it's already in his head. And no matter how many times he watches it, it's already there. And he's always going to be thinking about that. It's going to be hard to convince him otherwise word anything but the N-word. Right?
I really hope he never watches Dallas season 1 because, one of the main characters' name is Digger Barnes.
Right. I mean, you're an old-time TV guy. Just kind of, even more, even think about Illyrio. I mean, guys who watch a lot of those old programs or have watched those programs. They were funny and humorous, and there's some, the Norman Lear, all the Norman Lear production. I mean, how does that stack up in today's world?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think Sanford and Son would be able to be stand up today, be branded as being racist. I mean, what is it? Woody was an alcoholic. He was making fun of, and then Esther was not the most attractive person. He was making fun of looks. They could never do that show. They could never do All in the Family. They couldn't never do the Jeffersons again. I mean, there's a lot of shows they could not do anymore today that they used to, which I thought were very entertaining. And that's why the other day I ranted on Facebook about how Hollywood is void of ideas. They keep remaking the same old. Like Roma Downey, I believe, is going to be the new Mr. Rourke and Mrs. Rourke now, or Ms. Rourke. I don't know what they're going to call her. Or are they just going to call her the Rourke, But I mean, Roma Downey, she herself, I believe, is not as liberal as other Hollywood folks are. So maybe she will be Ms. Rourke, or or Mrs. Work or Miss Work, whatever. But that
Yeah.
it's just days of old. Like I remember back in the days, the partnership or there was a partnership organization, Parents Television Council, across the river in Alexandria, that got its start, I think, shortly, like sometime in the 90s, I believe. So they got started. PTC got started then. But their big thing was, and I know their chair once came to one of our AIA conferences about television and Hollywood, how the right ceded Hollywood and education to the left by telling our kids not to go into teaching and so on. But
Not to go where?
not to go into teaching or going into the arts, like basically the crux he made was that as conservatives, we tell our children to become lawyers, doctors, engineers, and so on. While we tell them, oh, you don't want to go into teaching. There's no money there, is what his comments were. And he goes, we raised good children, entrepreneurs, business people, but we ceded the academia and Hollywood to the left. That was his arguments. These aren't my words. This is
sure. I'm not sure I buy the premises. I think. But.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, we all know Hollywood, how left Hollywood is, and things like that. But I mean, if I think about All in the Family, I mean, like, Archie Bunker and the things he said, his ethnic slurs or whatever. I mean, I go back as a child. I mean, I kept getting called chink, even though I was Japanese. They had the wrong epithet. They took them a long right epithet was for me. But we grew up, as kids, where if we learned an epithet, threw it out at somebody else, and everybody epithets at each other. But today's world, we would have all been suspended or kicked out of school. Back then, it was just something that we wound up doing.
Actually, I noticed as my kids were growing up that there were a few acceptable epithets. So, for example, you could, again, I'm talking about, going to school in the, how shall I say, the bubble of the Western county of.
You're in the slums of Bethesda, Mark.
Bethesda, right? Is you could make fun of hillbillies.
Yeah.
Hillbillies were acceptable, right?
How about redneck?
Well, redneck, it's funny. They didn't actually go down that road. It was hillbillies. But it's an interesting thing. So with COVID, the data of who's not vaccinated is like all over the place. So you've got people on the right who don't want to get vaccinated. But also the vaccination rate is much lower for African Americans than it is for Asians, whites, and Hispanics. And there are different gradations among that. So what's interesting is it's possible to, quote, and you've probably seen the president do this, make fun of people who aren't getting vaccinated, and there's a tone of that in the media. But it's interesting, it's very specifically directed at a particular group of people who are not getting vaccinated, as opposed to the sort of the racial component to it, because that would be off center. And it's fascinating because it is a very complex. You can, massage the data from a number of different directions and get different results on that.
I mean, here's one thing, just real quick on vaccinations. I mean, it's funny. Everyone seems to have amnesia. They all forgot when Kamala Harris, when she was running for vice president, she said, "I don't trust the Trump vaccine." Do you think that has nothing to do with certain folks not taking the vaccine? I mean, they never had the vaccine. If, say, heaven forbid, if Hillary had gotten elected in 2016, they never would have had a vaccine this soon. As the way
I don't know. It was obviously much more of a private sector. I mean, there were some specific choices that were made about approval process that allowed things to get streamlined that may or may not have taken place.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of changed it's kind of revolutionized vaccine. That's another show altogether. But
No, but I mean, you make a good point, though. I mean, particularly Mark, with the racial component of that, it's very tricky, and but we do have you're so spot on in terms of, Biden gives this kind of global thing about he's going after a certain group of people in essence. Because heaven forbid, should he also say, African Americans, you need to get vaccinated too. It's like
Right.
he doesn't want to highlight that at all. So it is that maybe hillbilly-ish. The unvaccinated tend to be largely a lot of people in the South, right? So,
right.
but a lot of those people in the South are also African American. So hello, let's come to reality on some of this. And then we have the debate now about, should schools mandate vaccines to return to campus? There's a big fight that goes over that, right? We've got some schools that said yes, and now we've got students, I think it was at IU, that are suing, and about this, and that's a tough call. I mean, from my own, I understand the need to be vaccinated. I mean, I think, look, it's not that big a deal to me. Go ahead and get vaccinated. I think that's the safe thing to do.
Yeah. And you get the J&J, not as many side effects.
Yeah, I mean, but are we supposed to be forcing people to do things, along this line? I mean,
Right.
I don't think we should do them. My view is everyone should get the vaccine. Okay, I don't like the mandate. I feel that way about all government mandates. I don't think the government should be mandating things such as how much soda I can get at the 7-Eleven, the way de Blasio, so you can't buy a super big gulp in New York City. I don't think the government needs to nothing good comes from government mandates like that. However, there is, and this may ruin my credibility with some of our friends, but I think seatbelt laws are not a bad thing. I think motorcycle helmet laws are not a bad thing because something. Guess who's going to pay for you when you become an invalid for not wearing a seatbelt in a car accident? It's going to be me, the taxpayer.
And that raises one of the really tricky issues about healthcare, is that when you go down that road of, quote unquote, individual choice, there's a whole lot of things that you can sort of take away from people in terms of individual choice under the sort of guise or with the explanation of, well, we'll have to pay for your mistakes, and therefore we're going to stop you from doing, we're going to stop you from having your big gulp because we're afraid you're going to get diabetes, and we don't want to pay for your chronic illness.
Yeah,
so it's that healthcare costs can be the, how shall I say, the leading edge for an awful lot of sort of the nanny state dictates.
Yeah. Speaking of,
wait till they start mandating how many M&Ms you can eat.
Well, I know. You know what would really get Dwight upset would be if they limited Shamrock shakes.
Yeah, they already do. There's already a war on. I can go get pumpkin spice, whatever, at Safeway right now. Right. But I cannot get a Shamrock Shake at McDonald's. There is something wrong with that. But funny, Mark, you mentioned sodas. And Don, let's talk about one of our favorite corporations, Coca-Cola. I am a fan of Coke. I'm not going to stop drinking Coke just because they got idiotic policies. But my view is, nobody in the media, nobody's ever said, Coke's doing their whole woke commercials about Coca-Cola. But hey, Coke, how about you talk about diabetes that your product is causing in the inner cities? Diabetes is running rampant in the lower income communities. The communities you all want to help by making it easy to, about the voting stuff. But, shouldn't you, where is Michelle Obama? Why isn't she wagging her finger at Coca-Cola and saying, don't waste money on this voter fraud stuff.
Yeah.
That's all. Steal elections.
There's something to be said for that, right? In terms of products that some of these corporations push out, that the inner city types more than the rest of us or whatever. Yeah. That's, they count on that, right? But they do try to salve their conscience by contributing to social justice and woke causes, and think that that is the way that their do-gooderism will satisfy all, and people aren't going to pay attention. I mean, because responsibility. I mean, now the left they just want to see to make sure that these guys are going to be funneling money towards their social justice causes, and not towards anything that's a conservative / Republican, pro-life, whatever you want to call it, at all. Get them to defund all those things, but fund all of our left-wing garbage.
Yeah, I mean, social justice will never cure diabetes or cancer or obesity in the inner cities. Just saying, social justice will never do that. But, so
we've got a president, we've got a Democratic, Senate and Congress that are this humongous, infrastructure bill that has very little to do with infrastructure, and is redefining what it means to have infrastructure, so-called, all the climate change stuff and everything like that that's in there. It's controlling us. It's going to, all these pet projects, all these left-wing claims, it's going to be in there if they get away. And who in the heck needs $3.5 trillion spent at this point in time? How can we afford to do any of it?
And I think Senate Republicans got duped on this. I think a lot of good people in the Senate voted for this infrastructure bill on our time. Oh, our other guest is here. Welcome. I guess we can go into extra innings.
Apparently.
The redistricting call that ran an hour over.
Hey, we're live, Maria. Just letting you know.
Oh. Hey guys.
Hey, so, anyways, we're talking with Don about Access and Academia today about all the stuff, and kind of do a little retrospect on AIM and AIA, because there'd be no AIA if it weren't for AIM. Both organizations founded by your dad, Reed. Correct, Don?
Correct.
Yeah, and.
We're glad to have Maria on, and one of the things we wanted to talk to her about is, and it's actually a great segue, because before we were talking about, schools and universities and some of many of the concerns that parents obviously have. I know that's a project that you've been very interested in, is encouraging more people to run for school boards, which is an opportunity to kind of, basically let people who are in the middle and to the right be heard. Tell me about how do you go about that, and what resources are there available to people who want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Mark. One of the big things is that we've kind of pushed towards, and I think the idea kind of came back when I was YR chair, we talked to the national chairman, Rick Lockery, and he talked about getting people who just graduated high school to run for school board. And because they were just in that system. So they're very familiar with how and what is going on in the school system. They're directly impacted by it. So getting, recent graduates, maybe perhaps students that are going to community college that are still relatively local, or people that are just recently graduated college even too, because they've also gone through the higher education system where they are. So getting people on the younger end that have just completed some sort of education. So they bring some sort of knowledge to the table of, hey, I just went through this process. And so educating people on what's actually going on in the school system, because I think a lot of when things were coming out, like CRT and everything else, parents were like blown away. And then with COVID, they got a front row seat to what their kids were being taught. So they're now kind of getting informed about that. And then when you bring in that component of just recent students, like, yeah, no, this is what I was taught. Like, this is what I went through. So talking to former students in that capacity has been something we've definitely looked at, but even just getting them to run for office as a whole, whether it be not even necessarily school board, but something local, municipal, even something like, something as little as maybe a town commissioner or something else, because there's other components to governing that they can actually bring some sort of perspective on.
So we were talking about, actually last week we had Bill Dotson. I don't know if you know that he lives in, well, you probably are one of the few people who knows about how many people live in his hometown of Port Tobacco.
Yes, there's only 8 No, I think it's up to like 12 or 16 now.
Yeah,
It's really not that
well,
many.
we don't know yet, but
Yeah.
2010 it was 13 people.
Yeah.
And I asked him if he had ever, because he's obviously run for office in a number of capacities. You know, that could be one of those races where your family could be a plus or minus, because, you know, if your family turns on you, you're going to lose, right?
So Port Tobacco actually, from a municipal standpoint, actually does have its own municipal government.
Yes, it does.
And half of the municipal government there is related. They're relatives. So it is very interesting. I know when we were doing the census stuff last year, we would get the Port Tobacco note. It's like too low to report. And then when you look further into their municipal government, I think it's like a brother, a sister, a mom, and like, or maybe it's like a mom and dad and son thing, but it's a family dynamic on the municipal government.
But there's some great advantages. I'm not sure how it works in Port Tobacco, at least for Montgomery County, is there's a sharing of the income tax. So local governments can provide additional services for their residents. I live in a small town, Friendship Village. And so in addition to the services that it pays for that Montgomery County doesn't pay for, the locality is able to pay for some additional things like a local bus, free bus, shuttle bus that goes to the metro, what have you. So local government can have a real sort of specialized set of services that are relevant to the residents.
Yeah, in fact, in Montgomery County, that's a great example. I mean, we see more municipal governments down county, but we do have them up county as well. Like Barnesville is one that comes to mind. You know, Prince George's County has them too. But I think more of what you're kind of saying, I think the residents that really see that kind of tenfold is Chevy Chase, because they have Chevy Chase and then they have it broken up by like, you know, I think it's like
5 villages.
It's like 5 villages. Yeah. And they all have like their own local government. I know when we were on the municipal subcommittee for the state party, we were looking at that in particular, and like the town Santa Claus was running for one of the commissioner spots. He unfortunately did not win, but you kind of really get to see just how homegrown these candidates can be. And one of the things that I've just been so proud about this year is the GOP's focus on that. You know, we as a party, even though some of these races are most of them are nonpartisan, we're still looking at getting Republicans elected to them, because that's essentially you want a conservative philosophy governing in these localities. And we've been able to show in blue areas that you can have Republicans and conservatives win. I mean, we saw pickups in Prince George's County this year alone. We had a runoff in Landover Hills and won. We won in Riverdale Park. And then we converted a blue area in Garrett County and Kitzmiller to Republican this year. So, you know, I always tell people to really start local. And if you want to start changing the dynamics of a county, if it's blue, start running at the municipal level or getting involved at the municipal level, because the turnout is so low. That's where Democrats get their bench. I mean, I can't tell you how many people ask me, like, where did this person come from or this person come from? And then just upon a little bit of investigation, well, they were the mayor of a municipality in Prince George's County or something. A lot of the Democrats, that's where they get their delegate bench from, is municipal government. You know, just to give you just a couple, I mean, like, I know Colin Byrd is one has come up repeatedly, and he's in municipal government in Greenbelt. So if Republicans want to start winning, you know, and start moving their way up, you know, eliminating that bench at the municipal level is exactly how you can start to chip away at it and have success. And we have 332 elections this year with 93 remaining. We've been getting really creative, and we have a record number of Republicans running in Annapolis this year. Mm-hmm. We have 5 Republicans running across 4 for wards, 1 for mayor, which is the most we've seen in forever, which is fantastic because they all decided not to run against each other. So that's actually going to be really key for us this year. We've already elected alone 22 Republican women this year and 17 young Republicans. So we're seeing a growth in those numbers at the municipal level.
Give me that figure again. 17 young
Republicans and 22 Republican women.
Wow.
And tell me, how is I mean, Montgomery County? We kind of knocked the socks off everyone. We got Tommy Rodriguez elected to the council. There's also another Republican on the town council. I won't say which town, but you know which town I'm talking about. And the Chevy Chases, Linda Willard, member of the Central Committee. She is, which one of the villages is she? The Chevy Chase
I
Village?
believe she's on.
Village.
It's the Board of
Village.
Managers. It's the Board of Managers.
Yeah.
And then we
Linda's
have
a Republican on
and
our
the mayor of
Central Committee.
Laytonsville.
Yeah.
And the mayor of Laytonsville. Yeah.
Exactly. And I really wish, the county party would have put a little push for some of these municipal races. Are you finding that most counties are being helpful in your efforts for this, or are you finding more of the counties are getting pushback?
I'm getting pushback. Shout out to Nicole Bennett, who co-chairs that municipal subcommittee with me. We actually her and I had a call last night just to kind of fill in the rest of our spreadsheet on the filing deadlines for the remaining races. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of pushback, and I just think more of people just think it's a year off, and I'm like, oh, this is the way to stay engaged. And just with a little bit of effort, I've gotten some help. I mean, we beat a Democrat incumbent in TRAP this year with a write-in candidate that was a YR in TRAP. So that was really cool for us to kind of be like, even a write-in candidate can win. One of the things that I got really excited about was, I guess, the Democrats started figuring out we were getting involved in municipal races, and the Lower Shore progressives started door knocking and trying to get involved in Wycomico, and they were unsuccessful.
They're being super spreaders when they go door knocking. Those Democrats are being super spreaders of COVID.
So they went door knocking earlier this year, and we were kind of like blown away by it because we're like, they were intimidated by a municipal race, but just putting a little bit of effort in these municipal races makes them pull resources, time, and energy away from ultimately money and time and the things that they could do for next year's races. So if we just put candidates up in some of these races, there's only like in some cases, like in Prince George's County, for example, the Landover Hills runoff was because only 6 people showed up to vote. 3 voted for the Republican and 3 voted for the Democrat. And then they had a runoff, and then the Republican won in the runoff. I mean, we're talking about single-digit elections, and putting up a Republican and having their family literally go vote for them can be the difference maker.
Yeah, and Berwyn Heights in Prince George's County, which is right next to Goddard, they have actually had Republican mayors and council folks there in Berwyn Heights. And if you can
College Park.
Yeah, College Park, and my feeling is, like great counties like Montgomery County, I think, I don't know if you spoke with the county recruitment chair. Her name is Ann Hingston. Has she been?
I've talked to Ann. Has she
been helpful of pushing for these municipal races, or is she more focused?
She's been focused on, I think, one municipal race, which is, that's her prerogative. I mean, we've been kind of looking at all of them. I know she's really kind of laser focused on one of them.
Yeah, someone needs to send her a telegram. Fine. No, but see, I think someone needs to send her a telegram and say, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can't just pick one field of battle. We got to fight them on all the lines, so to speak. There's no reason to cede ground to them, and it sounds like she's ceding ground to the Democrats.
Let's focus. Let me change direction just a little bit and talk about school board elections.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now I've talked to some folks in some more conservative counties where nominally every election is held by a Republican. But on school board, that's not the case. And obviously, these are issues, whereas, forgive me, Chevy Chase is probably, how shall I say, there are not a lot of Justice Democrats coming out of Chevy Chase. But on the school board, there really is some ideological battles. Obviously, things about the curriculum, the way COVID was taken. What are your plans for, most of those are next year, but what are your plans for having candidates running for school boards?
So I think one of the big things is obviously trying to find, obviously passionate people. And there was two approaches that we've taken for the municipal races that we've proven successful. Two, one being a texting campaign to for Republicans and people that like to vote, that consistently vote. So that they're engaged voters. And that's the big thing, is finding engaged voters, because they're more knowledgeable on the issues. The second thing is surfing the internet, specifically social media, for any sort of groups that have kind of popped up on issues in the county. For example, in Montgomery County, we had the reopened schools and a couple of the other ones, and just kind of perusing those and finding candidates that way. One of the other focuses that we're obviously looking at is Baltimore City. They do not elect their school board, and that is something that I know the Central Committee and members of the surrounding Republican clubs are focused on, trying to get some sort of either ballot initiative, petition, or something put together to get the Baltimore City school board elected and not appointed. So we're just trying to, A, make sure that voters have access to be able to elect that representation, but B, finding people that are relatively known in the community. One of the big things we have found with school board is name ID is important. And especially now that these issues are kind of coming to light and these candidates have a hard time getting their name out there. So if you find a teacher that is popular, or a community organizer that's popular, that already kind of has a little name ID, and then you kind of can couch that with their views on education, you have an easier time, putting them up as a candidate and giving them the best shot possible to win.
Now, obviously, one of the things that's always been sort of how shall I say, the big gorilla in school board elections has been the support of the teachers union, and particularly the Apple ballot. Do you think you can balance that off? And do you have some thoughts as to how to do that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely ways to balance that off. I mean, I think we've talked a little bit about, internally putting our own type of ballot together, kind of like a slate of school board candidates and what we want, people to vote for. I think people are even more vigilant now more than ever about school board because of between masking and vaccines and school closures and the disproportionate kind of levels that students have been. Some were in school for the full year, some were hybrid, some were not in school at all. So I think a lot of parents feel like in some cases kids were disproportionately taught, and some were given that leg up, which we're not going to see necessarily right away, but down the line when they're graduating high school or they're moving on to college, kind of where is that level playing field. And I do think there's a certain amount of students that are going to struggle in the next year if they go back and they were not in person last year, adjusting and getting, used to kind of getting back in the swing of things, but also competing with their fellow students for whether it be honors classes or placement or for other classes. I know, at least in my family, my siblings were able to go back hybrid, but they were lucky because they were, went to a private school. So they had that ability to do that. Not all students, unfortunately, had the ability to either choose. I mean, my siblings had the choice. Did they want to go back or do they want to go hybrid? And they chose to go hybrid. That was ultimately the parents' decision on what they wanted and the students' decision. And not everyone was given that right. So honestly, I think, and a lot of that is just because of, spacing and capacity and everything else. So there's a lot of, each school is different. Each school has different restrictions and things like that things that they can provide their students. So I think it's definitely going to be a test in the next year to see if these candidates can be successful. I know there's a couple that have kind of come out of the woodwork a little bit. I've talked to a couple people in Montgomery County that are interested in running for school board, but haven't made up their mind yet, which gives me some hope. And one in particular, I'm hoping actually does, because they've run for office before, so they have a little name ID. So we're hoping that we can get her to run. But again, I think a lot of it is just getting their names out there early. If they're going to run, file to run, get your name out there, because if you minimize your window, it's going to make it really hard to get you through the election.
Now, in
And
Montgomery County, you run countywide. I think that's the case everywhere, right? That you run countywide, or do you have districts? We have districts in some areas.
Some areas have districts, some areas are countywide.
but Anne Arundel has districts, I think, Mark. Like
Yeah.
Corinne represents that Pasadena
Mhm.
area.
So some have districts and some are countywide. So the thing about school board is none of it's consistent. You've got Baltimore City that's appointed. You've got like Anne Arundel County that's by district. You've got Montgomery County that's at large. So, and I think Frederick.
It's actually confusing. It's
yeah.
confusing in New York. It's you run countywide, but there has to be a distribution by district as to where the members live. So it's deceptive. Yeah.
So and some of it is when you have that conversation, it's how much ground they have to cover. Like it's more appetizing to run in a district where you're like, this is my set district and these are my constituents and this is how many students that I'm representing, versus a county like Montgomery County that has hundreds of thousands of people and you have to make that many voter contacts in the same window as other people in other counties.
Right.
So. And I mean, that's actually, I remember back in the old days in Montgomery County, we actually had 2 Republicans on our Board of Education years ago. And then I think it's been I think the last one may have been Steve Abrams was the last Republican on the Board of Education, Mark?
Could be.
Yeah, it's been a long time. And I know with the efforts of you and the YRs and the Women's Federation, tell us about your new role.
Yeah. So thanks, Dwight. So I was nominated to be the 4th vice president of the MFRW. That election is in November. I've started working with some of the women in the Women's Fed. I've been a member of the Women's Federation for 3 or 4 years now. So it is not necessarily something new. It's just I'm spending more time with it, as I've been telling people. And it's been really fun because we've started tossing around ideas and things that we want to do. I'm really excited with where the Women's Federation is right now. I think a lot of it that they've been working on, they've been putting that prep work in, and we're really excited to kind of take it to that next level. The Women's Federation has done a remarkable job at putting tools in place for the women to be informed on issues like particularly with legislation and just letting people know about what's kind of going on to an extent. But I think now it's kind of the time to mobilize them. And I'm really excited to work with those women to mobilize them in a way that they've not been mobilized before. We saw that they've mobilized in different ways, whether it be testifying, but now trying to mobilize them to run for office, trying to mobilize them to help candidates in new ways. I mean, some of them have done postcards and made phone calls, but maybe like trying that technology component or getting them to knock the door for the first time, but helping them kind of maybe get out of their comfort zone to an extent and be more impactful. And frankly, there's a want for that in the Federation. And I'm just really excited to help them get to that next level and to honestly help our candidates next year be successful.
Now, you've, correct me if I'm wrong, the Federation has set up a virtual club. So how does that work?
So I am a part of the virtual club. I'm one of the vice presidents of the MFRW Republican Women Leaders Club. And it's a club that meets monthly with a different topic every month. In June, we had Kendall Ehrlich and Sheriff Mike Lewis talk about human trafficking. Last month in July, we talked about CRT, and we brought in some outside speakers from a couple different organizations. And in August, we're going to have the meeting Beyond Redistricting with a couple of outside different groups and speakers and such like that. So each month has a different sort of theme, if you will. As months go on, maybe we have an elected official that talks, about why they're running. Maybe it's a Republican woman, whatever it may be. But a lot of it right now is issue focused because we're trying to brush up the women's knowledge on talking about issues and talking about, maybe specific policies it might be. So when they go talk to voters next year and they ask about issues, the women are informed about it. And I think it's a really great thing. We've had over 50 women on our calls in the past couple months. It's continued to grow. I'm very excited about the direction it's going. And it's just really fun because you can get some really cool women that are pretty busy professionally. And you're like, oh, wow, like such and such is on. So it's like women that may not necessarily be able to go to an event across the state, and you can get a lot of really cool.
Have you had Delegate Dr. Brenda Cham on yet?
Dr. Brenda is actually a member of our club.
Yeah, she's a great speaker.
She's an amazing speaker. I don't think she's spoken to the club yet. It just got revamped a couple months ago. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm sure we're going to have her on at some point. And
I trust you'll have Kelly on.
Yeah, she's actually a member.
When did you guys meet?
So it's typically the third Tuesday of the month. Or actually, no, is it the third or the fourth? Hold on, I'll pull my calendar. It's the fourth Tuesday of the month, typically. And it's usually 7 o'clock, I think it is. I think it's like 7 to 8 usually. And yeah, it's just really fun. And honestly, I really like it because you can get a different group of people every month. But I also like going to the in-person events, obviously, and I continue to go to other Women's Federation events as they come up, and when I get invited to them, obviously. But I'm really excited to be part of this new executive board coming in. I am not the youngest one coming in on the board, actually. Liliana from Harford County was also selected to be on this new board as well. So I'm really excited to see the youth, particularly with the Republican women, that it's coming in and getting ready to take the helm of our federation. And to have the balance that we're about to have in November is going to be something I think very special, but also is going to be something that's going to grow the organization in a new way that we haven't been able to do.
Sounds good.
Yes, you got some big things ahead of you, it looks like.
I'm hoping.
Wishing you all the best in your endeavors. Real quick question on redistricting. I know there's a lot of talk about legislative single-member districts. Is that really going to happen, you think, in Montgomery County, single-member districts, or is this just kind of like dangling a carrot and they're going to yank it away from us and it's going to be same old, same old?
Well, I think it's in the governor's executive order. So obviously it's something that's stipulated that he wants. Ultimately, we're going to have to see, the legislature is going to put together their own map as well. From a personal perspective, I think both maps are going to be presented to the governors and the legislature. And I think we're going to potentially see a court battle ensue. So I think we're definitely going to see single member districts in some capacity. It's going to come down to with the maps that are fair, though. And I think the courts are going to do their very best. But we're also going to have to see what the legislature provides, too. This is a whole new ballgame. This is the first time a Republican governor has overseen this process ever in Maryland history. There's never been a Republican governor to oversee any sort of redistricting process. So there's a lot of new things that we're seeing, and a lot of different ways people are going about redistricting. We're seeing an independent commission for the first time. We're seeing, a legislature also put together a map simultaneously. But ultimately, I wouldn't count it out, Dwight. I think there's definitely a possibility for it. But it's really hard to say. It's really early. The Census Bureau data comes out tomorrow, and then prisoner reallocation has to happen. And then we will let both commissions do what they are supposed to do, which is draw maps and take, input from the public. And then the legislature, I'm sure, will vote on the maps, and then we'll see what happens if the courts are called upon to act and rule on any sort of ruling. But I wouldn't feel down about it, Dwight. I definitely think it's a possibility, but a lot remains to be seen.
And here's the thing. We can elect Republicans in 50-50 districts. We have that happening all over the country. The Will Hurd seat, I think, might have been a +1 Democrat seat, and we held that seat. I know Congressman King's seat has changed from when he initially got that in 1992. Has changed from the second to the third for him.
People could be competitive in both,
Yeah, I mean, that's, even I think even Neil Parrott, even if CD6 just goes a little bit north in Montgomery County and say we just have the top echelon of Montgomery County, it's a winnable district for a Republican.
Well, I think especially going into next year from a political standpoint, there's going to be a lot of wins in a lot of different areas. And I think it's going to take the 2022 cycle for us to really see what's winnable and what's not. And I think in 2026, we'll have that opportunity to pick up anything that we didn't pick up in 2022. I will say that the demographics in Maryland, just preliminary, it's changed a lot. I think Maryland is a much different state than it was 10 years ago. And I definitely think there's winnable areas for Republicans. And ultimately, we'll have to see what happens. But Maryland, I think, could potentially get a little bit more red, especially with what we've seen happen across the country. And we've seen states, outside of Maryland, obviously, but you've got Texas and Florida that, saw plus districts that are picking up districts. So, from a federal perspective, I also think that we have the opportunity to pick up not just in Maryland, but across the country.
Thank you very much for coming on. And we appreciate you coming on after your board call.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
No,
Dwight.
no rest for the weary, Maria.
No, not at all.